Hi, everyone. My name is Blake Hansen, and the title of my talk is Civilians in Crisis, Why the United States Should Help Syrians. An event that occurred in March 2011 is what many are calling the Arab Spring. Protests erupted in several countries such as Egypt, calling for an end to oppressive regimes that valued political power over human rights. However, one country stood upon the precipice of turmoil even more than its neighbors. Afflicted by a corrupt government and a severe drought, the citizens of Syria could no longer tolerate the government led by President Bashar al-Assad. The resulting conflict between Assad's government and the Free Syrian Army has created a humanitarian crisis that has sent ripples through the international politics and humanitarian relief system. Published by World Atlas, the most recent data that I have found has placed the civilian death count in the Syrian civil war at approximately 115,000 people. Of these 115,000, 8,000 were women and 12,000 were children. To put these numbers into perspective, that's approximately 3 people dead for every student enrolled at CSUMB in the fall 2016 semester. Or it's about 70% of the population in Salinas. Seeking escape from this bloody conflict, Syrians began leaving the country in large numbers. Here is a timeline of asylum applications to the European Union. As these numbers show, the amount of refugees seeking asylum from this conflict has only increased since 2011, and it doesn't seem to be going down. It's easy for us in the United States to forget about this conflict, but for many people, it's a reality that they continually have to face. Although this figure shows that Europe is accommodating refugees, it's really a problem in Syria's neighbors. According to an article that I found in 2015, Syrian refugees have caused a population increase of about 25% in Lebanon. According to Patricia Malmar, an advocacy and communications officer at World Vision Lebanon, relations between Lebanese and Syrian refugees have gotten tense. In her words, in some towns the population has doubled. This has put a lot of pressure on health services and educational services. If you talk to some Syrians, they say that some Lebanese have started to say that they deserve what's happening to them. It's a result of frustration, and the international community needs to give aid and assistance to both sides. So currently, Europe and Syria's neighbors are accommodating many refugees. What is the United States doing? According to the Pew Research Center, the United States accepted about 85,000 refugees in 2016, with only 13,000 of them coming from Syria. In order to have an impact similar that Lebanon experienced, we would have to accept about 82 million refugees, which far exceeds the number of people that live in Syria in the first place. However, another troubling fact is that according to the Pew Research Center, about 56% of Americans believe that the United States has no responsibility to accept refugees from Syria. Considering that these refugees are simply evading a war that they have no interest in, what's the reason for that statistic to be so high? I began looking at a couple of other analyses. I asked the question, well, realistically, how many of these people could be like terrorists in weight? According to this figure from the Cato analysis, only about 15% of terrorist activity in the United States has been due to refugees and asylum seekers. These people are a small percentage of the terrorist attacks that we have on our soil. Another question that I began to have is, well, what kind of impact could they have on our economy? An analysis of the impacts that refugees have on economies by the International Monetary Fund revealed that in most countries, these countries that accepted refugees experienced a mild positive increase in their economy. Granted, some did have a decrease, but the correlation is overall positive. So when I initially gave this talk to my peers in my mathematics consultants class, I thought that I had accurately captured the horrors that Syrians have faced for the past 6 years. But unfortunately, only 2 weeks later, the Syrians faced a horrendous chemical attack that claimed the lives of 69 people, injured many others. But unfortunately, interest in these affairs are short-lived. Just this morning, I pulled this figure that shows interest in Syria over time on Google searches. As you can see, there's some sharp spikes, but they're quickly diminishing. People stop caring. So my question for you is, What will it take for people to care and finally end this conflict? Thank you so much.
We have time for a few questions.
So,
Mhm.
how did, as a math major, you choose this particular social issue to focus on? What made you care?
So I'm currently in the mathematics consultants class, which is the math service learning for statistics concentrations. And we had an assignment where we basically had to take a data-driven perspective on a social justice issue. And going through all the proposed topics, I kind of wanted to pick something that was unique but still really relevant. And I was thinking that I was really uninformed about the Syrian crisis. And so I began kind of just putting these statistics together and realizing that not only was the conflict in Syria still happening, but it is apparently getting worse. And then I tried to pull some statistics about like what the United States was doing about it. So I guess to recap on your original question, I just knew that I needed to become more educated about this. And so I started looking into the data, and this is what I found.
Excellent job.
Thank you.
Can you tell me what the response was from your peers when you presented it to your colleagues?
So interestingly enough, 3 of us are from my same class, and we nominated people based on peer evaluations. So I guess based on that criteria, it was well received by my peers.
I love your approach in terms of using very compelling data to communicate about the problem. And I guess the challenge is that a lot of folks don't necessarily seem to be swayed by that kind of information. Is there a way that you could, I don't know, couple that with maybe a more emotional perspective?
Oh, of course. That's a really interesting question, because over the course of this semester we talk about as more like mathematically and statistically literate people start advocating for these issues, that it'll be easier for the public to understand that. But I think you make an interesting point, bringing the more like emotional arguments into these. I guess I tried to sort of capture that when it came to comparing the amount of civilian casualties to like 70% of the population in Salinas. But
Well, I think you did a nice job because you coupled those images with the statistics. So I think you're on the right track.
Absolutely, and I would just follow up on that, Jan, that the current statistics, even this week, are showing, the headlines this morning are showing that there's an estimated 50 individuals per day that are being executed. They're Syrian detainees, and that's been a secret. So as a follow-up, you could just continue to collect that data and then have some of those vignettes and images as well.
yeah,
Very compelling.
yeah, it's kind of hard, you know. I give this presentation in March, but only 2 weeks later it's immediately outdated, and a lot of the figures are probably, you know, the 115,000 figure is probably unfortunately undercutting what actually has happened.
And continuing to worsen, but unfortunately you'll have that longitudinal data. So excellent.
Yeah, thank you.
I just wanted to, I really liked the way that you used the number of refugees in Lebanon and compared it to the U.S. with the 18 million. And saying, oh, more than double the population of California. It helps to visualize what how much more others are doing. That was a really great use of numbers.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Blake.
Thank you.